We live in such a beautiful place. Aren't we grateful that God put us here right now for such a time as this? What a gift He has given us in His book, in His word, in His purposes that we can understand, or at least try to understand Jesus' mission here on earth, what He came to accomplish for us, that they hold our hand, the triune God holds our hand on our own journey of faith to help us to understand that it was the blood of the Lamb, the blood of our precious Jesus Christ, shed on that cross, is why we are redeemed. Before we start chapter 27, we're going to do a little recap. Here's where we are. Jesus has, at this point, been brought before the high priest of that day, Caiaphas, along with the teachers of the law and the elders. He has remained silent until verse 64, when he answers the question, "Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Those present believe he has committed blasphemy when he answers, "You have said so. But I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." At which point Caiaphas tore his clothes. Even though it clearly states in Leviticus 21:10, "He who is the high priest among his brethren, on whose head the anointing oil was poured, and who is consecrated to wear the garments, shall not uncover his head nor tear his clothes." So Caiaphas was clearly breaking an Old Testament rule. At this point, the others spit in Jesus' face and struck him with their fists, clearly treating him with violence and contempt. We leave chapter 26 with Peter, after insisting he would never abandon Christ, doing just that for the third time, as the rooster crows. Now we enter chapter 27. The Sanhedrin, who were all present in spite of it being illegal for them to meet at night, have an official meeting at daybreak and make their plan to have Jesus executed. Verse 2. So they bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the prefect. This was necessary because the Roman rule did not allow the Sanhedrin the right to carry out their own capital punishment. Despite the fact that the Sanhedrin had sentenced Jesus to death, they had to bring Jesus before Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, who ruled from AD 26 to 36. Normally, he would have been at Caesarea, but during major festivals such as the Passover, he came to Jerusalem in order to keep the peace during that politically turbulent time. John alone tells us that the Jewish leaders do not want to enter the governor's headquarters because it would make them unclean to participate in the ongoing celebrations. As long as there isn't a roof overhead, they may enter a Gentile's courtyard, and they do so to meet Pilate. The charge of blasphemy would not result in a Roman execution, but for Jesus to claim kingship meant that he would set himself directly against Caesar as a rival. This is why Pilate asks Jesus in verse 11, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "You have said so," Jesus answers. John records Jesus assuring Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world, and therefore he is no threat to Roman imperial power. As the surviving historical records make it abundantly clear, Pilate was not accustomed to slavishly comply with the wishes of his subjects, including the Jewish authorities. The chief priests bring an onslaught of intensified accusations against Jesus. Then Pilate asks him, "Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?" But Jesus makes no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor. This fulfills Isaiah 53:7. Quote, "He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Pilate is not sure what to do with Jesus. He thinks Jesus is innocent, but the Jewish leaders are in a serious uproar. In his amazement and uncertainty, he sees an opening in one of the accusations that might provide a way out and relieve him of having to make a decision. The chief priests and the accompanying crowd of followers had insisted that Jesus was forming a revolt among the people from Galilee to Judea. Upon inquiring further, Pilate learns that Jesus is indeed a Galilean, and therefore under Herod Antipas' jurisdiction. Matthew doesn't record this meeting, but at this point, Pilate sends Jesus over to Herod. Luke alone records the details of Jesus' impromptu trial before Herod. Unlike Pilate, Herod had heard of Jesus' miraculous activities throughout Galilee and had long desired to see him in person. As with Pilate, the chief priests and scribes stand nearby, vehemently accusing Jesus, likely with the same political accusations they had earlier levied at him. Once Herod realizes that Jesus will not perform a miraculous sign and will not even award him the respect of answering his questions, he and his soldiers begin to mock Jesus and treat him with contempt. Since Jesus is not willing to lower himself and perform for the pleasure of his audience, he becomes the object of sustained verbal abuse. Further abuse consists in Jesus being dressed in fancy royal clothes, mocking his claim to be king, as was customary with political pretenders. Herod is more interested in seeing a miracle than determining the truth regarding the Jewish leaders' accusations. When Jesus refuses to do his bidding, Herod sends him back to Pilate. It is important to remember that Matthew has a particular style of writing. He condenses and consolidates a lot of details into a single narrative. And we find that here, that verses 27 through 31 likely occur before or even during the verses 11 through 26. The timelines differ for this reason from gospel to gospel, but basically the same story is being told. Pilate's initial verdict was not guilty. He told the chief priests and the elders that he will punish, then release Jesus. He said both he and Herod found Jesus innocent of the charges brought against him. A custom had developed to which the governor would release a prisoner each Passover. Most likely, this tradition was used to ease tension and anti-Roman sentiment that could easily escalate when a large number of pilgrims gathered in Jerusalem. Perhaps Pilate assumed the crowd would choose Jesus over Barabbas, a violent zealot who was charged with robbery, murder, and insurrection. Pilate doesn't want Jesus to be executed because he senses that the Jewish leaders are acting out of envy and malice. Matthew also adds that while waiting for an answer from the crowd, Pilate receives a note from his wife. It's an urgent message imploring him to have nothing to do with that righteous man because she had suffered a great deal in a dream because of him. Matthew does not elaborate, but it is a matter of record that Romans of this era placed a great deal of weight on dreams and visions and omens. So while Pilate is distracted reading this urgent message from his wife, who we later find out in Acts, her name is Claudia, and though the scriptures don't back this up, it was common belief in the first century that she became a Christian and was part of the church in Jerusalem. And it's interesting to think of God's providence in a situation like this because there's a distraction right here because of that dream. The dream provides an ultimate good for her if that story is proved true. We'll find out when we get to heaven. And also, this is giving the chief priests and the elders time to whip up the crowd using whatever means necessary, lies or threats or whatnot, encouraging the crowd to choose Barabbas. Now, Barabbas is not his real name either. His name is Yeshua, which is Joshua in Hebrew, which is Jesus in Greek. Same name, and his nickname is Barabbas, which means son of the father. Bar is son, Abba is father. So both men standing up there are Yeshua, son of the father. Polar opposite choice right there. You can choose the way of the world and be dead in your sin and rebellious and choose Barabbas, or you choose to put your faith in Jesus the Christ and be born again and be righteous before God. This is an ongoing choice, not just a choice for the people of that day. Honestly, the choice between Yeshua, the Son of the Father, or Yeshua, the Son of the Father, summarizes the gospel. One man, Jesus, suffers condemnation, though innocent, receives the punishment that he did not deserve so that the guilty could be set free. That's our story. James 4:4 tells us, "Don't you know that friendship with the world is enmity against God?" Despite the crowd's choice of Barabbas, Pilate attempts to carry out his earlier stated intention to punish and release Jesus. He has Jesus flogged, during which time the soldiers mock Jesus by placing a crown of thorns on his head and a purple robe on his tattered body. They pretend to offer him respect and honor as a king and then strike him with their hands. Ironically, the soldiers mock the true king of the entire universe. This initial pre-sentence flogging would have been much lighter than the post-sentence scourging that Jesus will later endure. Having had Jesus flogged, Pilate presents him to the crowd, all bloodied, and tries to demonstrate that he didn't think Jesus deserved death. He had administered the punishment he thought Jesus deserved. At this point, Matthew, as well as Mark, record Pilate as asking, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the King of the Jews?" This question leads to what are among the most famous and chilling words in the gospel. Crucify him. When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. Quote, "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. "It is your responsibility." Unquote. That was verse 24. 25, all the people answered, "His blood is on us and our children." Verse 26, then he released Barabbas to them, but he had Jesus scourged and handed him over to be crucified. The final stage in this mock trial concluded with the scourging, which is so brutal and violent that prisoners occasionally died before they were actually crucified. This is really, really tough subject matter right here. It's utterly unbearable. We don't even want to think about this, but we must to truly understand Jesus' sacrifice, his willingness to endure this barbaric torture, to suffer to the absolute human limits. It's beyond our comprehension. During Roman scourging, the prisoner is tied to a post and beaten with whips. They're short whips, usually 18 to 24 inches long, with several interwoven leather straps, and each strap will have sharp sheep bone and metal balls attached to it. The type of beating Jesus received would tear his flesh down to the muscle and bone, often even exposing internal organs. There's usually a person on each side, a Roman, so that there's like no relief. It's going constantly with these whips back and forth, right to left to right to left to right. Often the little balls and bone would hit the person in the face. Their back is to the scourgers, the men hitting them with the whip, and their hands are up high, tied to a post, and so there is no way for them to defend themselves. Watching this type of brutality has long been forgotten in our 21st century. America for sure, but that people used to enjoy and participate in watching people die or being killed. It was a spectator sport. Think of the Roman Colosseum. It's absolutely so hard for us to even grasp. Apparently, the soldiers beating Jesus were fueled to even more cruel and weaved a crown of thorns, no doubt driving those thorns into his head. Did you know thorns possess a poison that makes penetration even more painful? Think of the tiny, tiny sliver you get in your finger that causes you so much pain. That's what's in his scalp. Every detail was ordained by God to serve his purposes. Hundreds of years earlier, Isaiah wrote in 52:14, just as there were many who were horrified by him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any human being, and his form marred beyond human likeness. Isaiah 53:3, he was despised and rejected by mankind, a man suffering and familiar with pain, like one from whom people hid their faces. How did he even survive such an enormously brutal beating? And now he's told he will be carrying the crossbar of the cross on which he will hang and die. Verse 32. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. Isn't that another irony? Two men with the same name. Simon Peter, who professed complete devotion to Jesus just the night before, is nowhere to be found. In Matthew 26:33, Peter said, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." In verse 35, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." Yet where is he now? But God found another Simon who carries the crossbar for Jesus. It's a common question, especially for non-Christians. Why on earth did Jesus have to suffer so egregiously? The sins of God's people were punished in the Old Testament symbolically in the animal sacrificial system laid out in the Torah. So the animal took the blame, so to speak. God cannot turn a blind eye to our sin. The act of propitiation is an act of appeasing the wrath of an offended person or deity in this case, and being reconciled to him. The turning away of the wrath of God as the just judgment of our sin by the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross. Our original communion with God was disrupted with Adam and Eve and their original sin. And we, as all sons of Adam, we deserve judgment. The wrath of God is an expression of his holiness. Wrath is what our sin and rebellion justly deserve. Even though God is a God of infinite love, he does not just show mercy at the expense of his justice. So propitiation is the way that a loving God shows us mercy, because he provided a way for us to be forgiven and accepted as righteous, even when we are sinners. He provided this way. That is John 3:16. He provided his only Son so that we could be forgiven and have eternal life. You have to understand this to really grasp what the heck is going on here. Starting now in verse 33. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed a written charge against him. This is Jesus, the King of the Jews. 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, 'I am the Son of God.'" In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness came over the land. About 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani? My God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing there heard this, they said, "He's calling Elijah." Immediately, one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him." And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice and he gave up his spirit, at that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Many women were there watching from a distance. They had followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one after Preparation Day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, 'After 3 days I will rise again.' So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first." "Take a guard," Pilate answered. "Go make the tomb as secure as you know how." So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting a guard. Well, as we conclude chapter 27, Jesus is in the tomb. And we have the glorious good news coming next week. But let's sit this week and be reminded of the sacrifice and the willingness of our Lord Jesus, knowing full well what he was going to go through. That pain, that agony, that inhumane treatment. Yet he did it anyway, for you and for me. Let's just sit in that gift, that miracle, that love. Let it motivate us to love every human who is made in God's image. Every single one needs to know the gift of salvation. We need to get out there and witness. Let's go.